Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
I'm with Shamika Ravi, an economist, a non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, a think tank in Washington, D.C., and whose handle, @Shamika Ravi, has informed us through the pandemic over the last year and a half with data telling us exactly what's going on with the pandemic, with the various COVID waves. And today we are marking or celebrating the 1 billionth dose of the COVID vaccine in India. Shamika Ravi, welcome to The Print.
Thank you, Jyoti. Good to be here.
So, Ms. Ravi, tell me, it's a big day for India, 1 billionth dose, 9 months after the first COVID vaccine was given. And I'm just going to read some figures that we've been given. So this is 9 months after the first vaccine was given to Indians, at an average of 37 lakh doses a day and 1.5 lakh doses an hour. I mean, that's quite a remarkable achievement, isn't it?
No, absolutely, Jyoti. I think the reason it is a remarkable day is because, at the end of the day, we need to understand the context within which we've been able to achieve this landmark. We are a resource-poor economy, particularly the health sector in many parts of the country is extremely stretched. And I think that is the context within which we have to understand why India is clearly punching above her weight. Mm-hmm. Within 9 months, I frankly think that even the most optimistic people would have not anticipated being able to reach this landmark within such a short span of time. Right from sourcing the inputs, there were disruptions in the beginning. Then, of course, the production, the manufacturing itself, and the increased heightened demand because of the second wave, the export restrictions, then subsequently, the actual administration of the vaccines, that even if we have the adequate numbers, just being able to administer it in remote parts of the country or even in states where public health is extremely fractured and limited. It was a very tall order. And I think it's within that context that I think it is a truly remarkable feat.
So, Dr. Ravi, the first question I have to ask you, I know economists don't have crystal balls, but I really have to ask you, do you think there's going to be a third wave, which is, as bad or whatever, even half as bad as the second wave that we went through in April, May? Because that's something that's bothering, I think, all Indians with the festival season coming up, then again, Christmas, New Year. So the next few months is going to be difficult. What do you think?
No, that's a completely valid concern, and it is clearly running at the back of all our minds. I would be lying if I said that people aren't, even if you're vaccinated, you aren't concerned. We are all truly concerned. Having said that, I think by now we have seen enough epidemiological models get predictions wrong. In fact, as late as middle of March, we had many leading epidemiologists who are following the Indian pandemic. Claim that we will never have a second wave because we have, adequate immunity and so on and so forth. Even those who had very sophisticated mathematical models said, look, state by state, we're not going to have. And then boom, we did. Yeah. And I think the point to take home there is that, the biology part of it, where the virus itself is mutating and coming up with new variants, no one predicted Delta. And the severity and the transmissibility of a variant like Delta truly did take us, by surprise. And then, of course, it was very personal. Each of us went through, immense stress and trauma. And if you look at the data, then second wave was very, very, it raised the daily numbers overnight. Yeah. But as is the case with Delta wave, we also saw it decline within weeks, but having caused a lot of stress and right. Lost lots of lives. But what I have been doing right from the beginning, Jyoti, is not crystal. I have never projected, in terms of forecasting, because we sure. just are not in the business of forecasting. Absolutely. We look at real numbers, the current numbers. And I think the long-term trend, the current 10-day moving average or the 7-day moving average is as good as it's going to be to frankly think of policy implementation. What are the policy priorities to focus on?
Yeah.
And currently, the active cases are still declining. And I think that's an important point that we need to keep reinforcing. And why we need to keep a daily watch is that if daily numbers, the active numbers, these are the net numbers, meaning new cases minus the recovered. If that is still declining, then basically it tells you that the infection overall is still receding. Mm-hmm. So against this backdrop, when you have, you're reaching scales of vaccination, which does provide you with enhanced immunity, but there is reason to believe that there's no imminent threat. Mm-hmm. Now, no one can predict variants, so we don't know. But at the moment, I really think we need to reinforce confidence so that people can go about their normal lives, having, following certain protocols. I mean, wearing the masks, maintaining social distance before the festival season. Yeah.
So 2 questions from that, Dr. Ravi. The first is that, you talk about the 7-day moving average or the 10-day moving average. Now, the figures that have come in today, which is, Thursday afternoon, says that India has added 24,000 odd more cases. Now, those would be active cases, I imagine, right? But you're saying despite that, it's declining, the trend shows that it's declining?
Yes, because if you look at the new active cases every day, it includes the new confirmed cases that we know of, minus the recovered cases. So it is how much is the new infection burden rising, and actually it's a negative growth, which means we are seeing a receding. The infection itself is receding.
Okay.
Though the daily numbers are still 20,000 is a large number, but recovery is clearly more robust, and that's why I think the fear is unfounded. Now, important thing to bear in mind, we are a continent. So what is holding at the national level, thankfully, is also holding at every state, barring some parts of the Northeast. And Mizoram was a case of concern until at least 10 days back. So I think, while at the national level there is no concern, that localized scrutiny remains and should remain a priority for the state governments and even the central government.
Now, the other question that I have is this decline due to just the virus burning out? I mean, for lack of a better word, or is it because India is vaccinating in such large numbers and therefore you're preparing to meet this Delta variant or perhaps new mutants to that variant? You're able to sort of deal with that better.
It's very difficult to tell eventually why the cases are receding. It has to be a combination of the fact that there is a certain amount of immunity developing on account of this massive, vast vaccination drive that we are undergoing. But the virus itself, Jyoti, also has a sort of a natural life to it in terms of if you see the waves and the waves in which this infection has come to every country. It does follow a wave. So there is a natural sort of a recession happening in terms of the infection, but there is also the heightened immunity that individuals have on account of vaccination. Now, this is where the UK data is interesting, because UK is now seeing a very large, almost 45,000 a day.
Yeah.
But the hospitalization is not too high, not unmanageable. And these are good signs because they've also administered the AstraZeneca, what we call Covishield at home. So it tells you that there is there is significant immunity, at least to severe diseases or to severe sort of hospitalization condition against, Covishield does provide us with that protection. So I think all in all, it's very difficult to say why things are, but it's all of these factors together, which I think we have to look at. But from a policy perspective, we can't assume anything from the virus is very unpredictable still.
Right.
So from a policy priority, we have to focus on what we can do. And vaccination is clearly the pathway out of this pandemic.
Okay, so now the data tells us that 74% or so people have been given the first dose, they've been vaccinated with the first dose, both COVID as well as, or either COVID or Covishield, and that both doses have been administered to about 33% or so of the population. Now, in your view, how much more do you need to do to sort of become for the population to become immune?
Well, this is now, the existing literature seems to suggest that you need about 60 to 65% coverage, full immunization. And we are clearly, trying to move towards that, because if you see the overall daily numbers now, then the growth in the first dose is tapering off, because we've already achieved about 75% among adult population. The pickup is mostly on account of the second dose, which is natural, because within 3 to 4 months you're eligible now for the second dose. And I think now we need to move the policy needle towards vaccinating the younger population. Perhaps doing a larger antibody survey to figure out that do we have any waning, do we have decaying of this immunity, which is induced by the vaccine, especially for people who received it, let's say 6 to 9 months back, because this is what is being seen elsewhere. So I think we should prepare now at home as well. So I think children should be our next big priority, because we're clearly producing much more than we are administering at the moment. And we don't want expiry of vaccine. That would be a big shame.
So that should work for a booster dose as well for an older population. I mean, somebody like me, I was administered both doses in April. I think, I was sort of just lucky I got it done early. So that would apply for a booster too, wouldn't it?
Well, so I think this is where, because we have production, which is much more than what we are administering, we need to now really work on this two-pronged approach. One is to take it to younger population, because remember, our children have been home for now almost 18 months, and the schools and colleges are still not open. About 10% of our kids have access to online education, so that's hugely disruptive. And I think we need to focus on that part, but simultaneously also see whether, if there is a waning of the antibodies, if there is decay there and people are losing immunity, booster should be the next sort of step in that direction.
Okay, so Dr. Ravi, as an economist, you've been watching India not just sort of on the COVID front, but as an economy. And do things haven't, if you look at the data again, things haven't been that great, obviously, because India's economy was pretty badly, sort of beaten during the pandemic. How do you look at it today?
Well, again, if you look at disaggregated data, Jyoti, it's important to look at, before we get the next GDP numbers, I follow weekly or at least fortnightly, I try to follow the mobility data, which is a good proxy for how much economic activity is happening and how much is normalcy returning to different parts of the country. So at the state level, I've been monitoring this mobility of people, and quite reassuringly, we have a number of states, Uttarakhand, Himachal, Bihar, UP, Kerala, despite having large number of infections up until about 3 weeks back. These are all states that have now gone back to mobility and therefore economic activity above March 2020. So we have in some sense gone back to, if you call that normalcy, that's the level of movement.
Including Kerala, you would say, because Kerala has been showing very high numbers, right?
Yes, but that is, I think, where the insights are that, if you vaccinate, Kerala has covered about 90% of the adult population with the first dose. Himachal, Goa, several states have crossed 100%. But it tells you that, the enhanced vaccination gives tremendous confidence to people. And so they are going back to their normal way of life in terms of at least, moving around and going about business and shopping. And so this is data from different parts of the mobility metrics. So this is retail, this is sort of office complexes, people moving about for different purposes. And that is back to March of 2020. So it's quite reassuring that states are going back to pre-pandemic levels. Now, I think that is the reason why, despite having suffered a very debilitating second wave, we still see a quick recovery, even in terms of economic activity, and why forecasts like the IMF, etc., remain very high. In fact, India is, the forecast, the projections are that India will be the fastest growing country in the world this fiscal and the next fiscal. And I think it is on the back of the vaccination drive.
Oh, it's on the back of the vaccination drive, you would say?
Oh, absolutely.
Because that's injecting confidence into the economy, to people who want to go back and get back to their normal lives.
Oh, absolutely. I think, that is the policy lever. Remember, we can't sit on our backs and wait for the virus to, to play out its natural sort of evolutionary, process. So I think it's on account of the fact that vaccination in India has happened at the level that it has, that the economic projections remain pretty robust. And I think that is where that message has to go out to people at large. That, look, be responsible, continue to wear masks, don't go out and congregate beyond, a certain, level, but do go about your normal lives. I think we have to overcome the fear because, we are a, low middle income country, a very low middle income country, and we really can't afford to now not get back to high growth.
Now, Dr. Ravi, explain to me, you work with the Brookings Institution, which is a think tank in Washington, D.C. And my question is on the comparison between India and the US on the anti-vaxxers, or the people who don't like to take vaccines, who are hesitant about taking vaccines. Why do you think India has been so receptive to this massive campaign? And why do you think in the US, there's large populations that are not?
Well, I think, first of all, the vaccination drives for us is a way of life. We've had very large vaccination drives, even in the poorest part of the country, and people are quite receptive. So it is not new, right? We have, in the very remote parts, women taking their babies, little children to schools on Sundays, Polio Sunday, and so on and so forth. So I think vaccination, the pushback against it is not as, in fact, in the beginning, we had certain amount of misinformation. There were rumors about infertility. Somebody called it the BJP vaccine, the Modi vaccine, so on and so forth. In the South, I think there was the death of an actor in Tamil Nadu, which triggered, again, a certain fear. But I think the collective response has been mostly rational. Right. And I think that is because, unlike in the US, people are receptive to science. And I think this is where we have to give credit where it's due, that, we are a poor country, but, we have made all the right decisions within our very, very limited means right from the beginning. We didn't have the kind of anti-science positions, which frankly the US, including the leadership under the Trump administration, etc., took in the beginning. And I think, Jyoti, it also reflects to some extent, remember, a very large percentage, a significant percentage of the US population does not believe in, the Big Bang theory. And I mean, there are areas, there are parts of the country which are quite orthodox and anti-science. And I think they remain the boundaries that I think the country, public policy will have to overcome, because COVID, it's an infectious disease. There are externalities. If you don't get vaccinated, it's not just you yourself who's putting your life at risk, but everyone around you as well, because this is contagious, right?
So is that one of the lessons of the pandemic then, is that, you're not safe, not just because you're inside your country, but you're not really safe because, there is international travel and people are going back and forth. So if you're not vaccinated, if you are vaccinated at home, but people are not vaccinated, elsewhere abroad, then you're actually not that safe anyway.
No, that is true. The externality part of it, the fact that it is an infectious disease, it's a contagious disease, means that even if you have the protection, and remember, by now we do know that because their variants have come about. Delta has clearly shown that, the second waves in many countries, which had very high levels of vaccination, the vaccine didn't prevent the infection from spreading. It did clearly limit the number of, hospitalization and deaths on account of it. But clearly in places and amongst demographics where comorbidity is high, where, there are other concerns, the infection is still very, very dangerous. So you do want more and more people to be vaccinated, because that's the only way you're going to be able to get out of this collectively. And I think that is where the challenges of leadership and galvanizing, the community level leadership and taking everyone along is so important.
So that's perhaps, Indians have a lot of faith in their leaders, right? I mean, people who rule us, who are elected by us. So my question to you is that, when demonetization took place in 2016, and that had a tremendous impact on the economy. Now, by 2020, when India goes into the pandemic like the rest of the world, do you think that it was beginning to ebb by the time India came into the pandemic, or did it sort of attach itself to the impact of the pandemic? And that's one of the reasons why the economy is so bad.
No, well, you have to look at, the impact of the pandemic. It was very, very severe. And we had one of the largest decline in the GDP was in India. And that is on account of the fact that because our public health infrastructure is so meager, and that's why I keep talking about resource poor economy, that within that context, national lockdown preemptively taken with relatively few cases was a pragmatic approach in terms of limiting the infection and death from it. But it also took a toll. The economic toll was very severe. And I think from then on, we have seen that, as testing has been ramped up and state level facilities, just, providing access to, beds, etc. at the local level, that bolstering of public health facilities at the local level did give confidence to people. So remember, the economy was also on the track of a robust recovery when second wave hit us. Mm-hmm. And the second wave was indeed very severe, but we had a very quick pickup after that. So I think we are, there have been, it's a longer term.
Sorry to interrupt you, but the quick pickup after the second wave, what do you attribute that to?
The infection, the fact that the infection receded and vaccination had already started to ramp.
Right.
The ramping up of vaccination. Yeah. And there was a demonstration effect, Jyoti. I think it's very important to remember when you said that Indians trust leaders, you need to underscore that it's of course at the national level, and there is a overwhelming support for Prime Minister Modi and him being able to galvanize this kind of pro-science, vaccine. There is a larger movement he's able to galvanize. But at the local level also, you have leaders who are able to mobilize and sort of drive people towards getting more vaccination, particularly remote areas. Right. Remember in the beginning when Akhilesh called it a BJP, I'm never going to get vaccinated, he said. And you have seen the district.
Akhilesh Yadav of the Samajwadi Party in Uttar Pradesh.
In the beginning, in fact, up until July, we were monitoring districts of UP and Tamil Nadu because there are considerable variations even within states of India. And we saw that the districts which had the least take-up were in fact the ones where Samajwadi Party has tremendous influence. And I think it took then a person like Mulayam Singh Yadav to get vaccinated publicly for the demand for vaccines to then rise up. So I think we have to underscore leadership, the fact that demonstration effect in this case is a very strong way to mobilize. And I think these are reasons why we have not faced the kind of hesitancy that the US has. And perhaps a little bit of, there is, in terms of the second wave now, I think the energy has to move more towards pushing people to go and get vaccinated. Because remember, when the infection is low, the wave is currently, receding, people might become a little more complacent and say, right, you really need the second, and you do. And I think that is where the next sort of steps are, pushing people to get their second dose of time to get fully vaccinated, moving our focus to children, so right, go back to being normal, and putting focus on the booster.
Right. So just quick last couple of questions. In retrospect, when you look at the, in the wake of the lockdown in March, on the 24th of March, when the Prime Minister announced the lockdown, and you referred to it a few minutes ago, in the wake of that, the mass migration that takes place inside our country, with people walking hundreds and thousands of kilometers, how would you, in retrospect, how do you think it should have been handled?
I think at all levels, Jyoti, something I've been writing repeatedly and speaking about is that we will be able to get out of this better and with lower costs in terms of lives and resources if we just coordinate better across states. And I think the migration problem in the beginning, that shock that happened, was on account of not having very good coordination, because you could see that there was a regional component. People were moving from the more industrialized urban western part of the country to more rural, eastern part of the country. And I think that is why I have often said that we perhaps need a GST style council for health, and particularly for infectious diseases, because it's very difficult to limit an infection to a particular region or a state, because we have so much mobility of people across. So we do need, and it's not just in terms of COVID, but in the future as well. I think we have to strengthen institutional response across states for these kind of big shocks.
So 3 recommendations or 3 lessons that you think India should learn from this, this awful 18 months that we've been through.
Invest in healthcare. Invest in public healthcare, because infectious disease with such huge externalities means that the private sector will have a limited response to it. We do leverage private sector. 75% of India's healthcare is private, but private healthcare has very limited solution for large infectious diseases, and especially of this pandemic proportion. So invest in public health.
Okay.
The pathway to economic recovery, the pathway to India's future growth will and does go through better human capital. Health is a very large part of it. So we have to make up for 70 years of relative neglect. And we have huge disparity across regions, rural, urban. We have huge disparities between genders and older people not having access. So healthcare, I think, has to be made an engine of growth. We have to look at it from a human capital and sort of a productivity enhancing component. And of course, there is the human, basic human rights aspects of healthcare. So I think the biggest lesson is we have to invest in healthcare, because otherwise it's too costly for all of us, economically and in terms of life.
Well, you've been an economist that we've actually discovered, lay people like us discovered through the pandemic, because you've given us the data, shown us how things work, and you've sort of connected seemingly unrelated things. And thank you so much for that, Dr. Shamika Ravi, for speaking to The Print.
Thank you, Jyoti. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for your time.